Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today, we are not just talking about tennis. We are not just talking about gold medals, scores, or rankings. We are talking about a moment that shattered diplomatic protocol, redefined presidential leadership, and sent a shockwave through the entire Southeast Asian region. Imagine the scene: the 33rd Southeast Asian Games in Thailand. A packed press conference room. The air is thick with tension. Sitting at the table is a 20-year-old girl, Eala, the newly crowned champion who just ended a 26-year gold medal drought for her country. She should be celebrating. She should be crying tears of joy. Instead, she is being verbally cornered, gaslit, and humiliated by a veteran journalist on live television. The questions are attacks. The tone is venomous. The young champion is crumbling. And then the unthinkable happens. The president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., who was sitting quietly on the sidelines, stands up. He walks across the room. He physically rips the microphone out of the journalist's hands and delivers 12 ice-cold words that silenced the room and ignited the internet. I will not allow anyone to attack her unfairly. This isn't just a viral clip. This is a collision of sports, politics, and raw human instinct. Today we are going deep. We are going to break down the hostile environment in Bangkok, the historic significance of Eala's victory, the bullying tactics of the Thai media, and the unprecedented intervention by a head of state that has the whole world talking. This is the full, uncensored story of the moment the president became the protector. Let's get into it. To truly understand the explosion that occurred in that press conference room, we first have to understand the powder keg that was the 33rd Southeast Asian Games. Context is everything. If you look at the SEA Games on paper, they are marketed as a celebration of regional unity, a friendly gathering of neighbors to celebrate athletic excellence. But anyone who follows these games closely knows the reality is often much darker, much more intense, and infinitely more competitive. When the games are held in Thailand, the host nation brings a level of intensity that is almost suffocating for visiting athletes. It is called home court advantage. But what the Philippine delegation walked into in Bangkok was something closer to psychological warfare. The National Tennis Development Center wasn't just a venue, it was a fortress. The atmosphere was electric, yes, but it was also incredibly hostile. Thailand came into these games with massive expectations. They had the facilities, they had the funding, and they had the athletes. They viewed the tennis gold medals not as prizes to be won, but as property to be defended. Every point played by a Thai athlete was met with deafening roars that shook the stadium foundations. Conversely, every error, every slip, every mistake by an opponent was cheered with ferocity that bordered on unsportsmanlike. Into this cauldron stepped Eala. Now, for the uninitiated, let's be clear about who this young woman is. Eala isn't just a participant. She is a phenomenon, ranked 53rd in the world. A product of the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, a player who has competed on the WTA Tour against the very best on the planet. She arrived in Bangkok, carrying the hopes and dreams of 110 million Filipinos. But she was also carrying a burden that few people discuss, the burden of history. The Philippines had not won a gold medal in women's singles tennis at the SEA Games since 1999. 1999. That is 26 years. That is an entire generation. Athletes competing in these games weren't even born the last time the Philippine flag was raised for the specific event. The drought had become a national obsession, a specter hanging over the sport. And Eala was a chosen one, the singular talent capable of exorcising that ghost. But being the favorite places a massive target on your back. The Thai crowds knew who she was. The Thai officials knew who she was. And they were determined to make her path to the gold as difficult, as uncomfortable, and as mentally draining as humanly possible. As the tournament progressed, Eala was clinical. She moved through the early rounds with the precision of a surgeon, dismantling opponents who simply couldn't match her pace or her power. But with every win, the tension in Bangkok ratcheted up. The local fans realized that their dream of a clean sweep was in jeopardy. By the time we reached the final, the atmosphere had reached a boiling point. It was Eala against Maninkaya Sawanki, Thailand's last hope, their local hero. The stadium was packed beyond capacity. People were standing in the aisles. The noise was deafening. Thai drums were pounding out rhythms designed to disrupt concentration. This was not a tennis match. It was gladiatorial combat disguised as sport. From the first serve, the dynamic was clear. So Wang Qi played the match of her life, fueled by the manic energy of thousands of screaming fans. She was retrieving balls that should have been winners, striking lines with impossible precision. But Eala, she was ice. In the face of overwhelming hostility, she remained composed. But it wasn't just the crowd. There were questions about the officiating. Throughout the match, questionable line calls seemed to mysteriously favor the home player. At one point in the second set, a series of absolutely atrocious calls sparked a massive argument on the court. The Filipino coaching staff was up in arms, pointing at marks on the clay, demanding reviews that weren't granted. The crowd bayed for blood, sensing that if they could just break Eala's concentration, the match would turn. This is the moment where lesser athletes crumble. This is where the pressure of the 26-year drought usually breaks a player. But Eala channeled every ounce of that frustration into her racket. She didn't complain. She executed. She started hitting winners so clean, so undeniable, that even the most biased linesman couldn't call them out. She systematically dismantled her opponent, point by point, silencing the drums with the sound of the ball hitting the strings. When she struck that championship forehand down the line, a bullet that painted the corner, winning the match 6-1. 6-2, the release of emotion was visceral. She dropped to her knees. She had done it. Against the crowd, against the calls, against the history. The drought was over. But as she would soon find out, the battle on the court was the easy part. The real war was waiting for her in the press room. The post-match ceremonies were awkward. The handshake was cold. The Thai officials looked visibly pained, handing over the gold medal. But the scene shifted to the press conference room, where the world's media had gathered. Usually, these press conferences are victory laps. The athlete sits down, thanks their team, talks about their training, and everyone goes home. But sitting in that room was a man named Sui Kai Yun, or a similar phonetic equivalent reported from the scene. This man is a titan of Thai journalism, known for an aggressive, combative style. He is a man used to making politicians squirm and corporate executives sweat. And on this day, he decided that a 20-year-old girl was his target. As Alex sat there, glowing with the satisfaction of her win, wearing the gold medal she had worked her entire life for, Yin grabbed the microphone. He didn't ask a question. He launched an assault. According to eyewitnesses, the interaction began with Yin undermining the victory. He spoke about how the draw was favorable for Eala. He spoke about luck. He spoke about injuries to other players. He was essentially telling her to her face, "You didn't earn this." Then he pivoted to the officiating, bizarrely suggesting that the calls had favored her, completely gaslighting the reality of the match everyone had just watched. But then he crossed the final line. He made it personal. He attacked her character. He questioned her sportsmanship. He criticized her celebrations as being disrespectful to the host nation. It was character assassination broadcast live. The room went silent. This wasn't journalism. It was bullying. It was a grown man, a veteran of the industry, using his power and his platform to humiliate a young woman who was merely trying to represent her country. You could see the change in Alex's face. The smile vanished. Her eyes began to glisten, not with tears of joy, but with tears of confusion and hurt. She looked at her coaches, but everyone seemed stunned by the ferocity of the attack. How do you defend yourself against that? If she fights back, she looks arrogant. If she stays silent, she looks weak. She was trapped. Yin kept going, pointing his finger, his voice rising, performing for the cameras, tried to salvage some Thai pride by tearing down the Filipino champion. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he was the king of that room. He forgot who else was sitting there. The intervention protocol shattered. President Bongbong Marcos had been sitting quietly to the side. He had traveled to Thailand to support the athletes, a standard diplomatic gesture. Presidents usually stay above the fray. They smile, they wave, they shake hands. They do not get involved in the nitty-gritty of press conferences. But as Yun's tirade continued, the president's demeanor shifted. Witnesses described the temperature in the room dropping. The polite, diplomatic smile vanished. His jaw set, his eyes locked onto the journalist. Marcos realized something in that moment. This was no longer a sporting event. This was a citizen of his country being abused. This was a young woman being bullied. And he was the only one with the power to stop it immediately. What happened next is unprecedented in modern political history. President Marcos stood up. He didn't signal for an aide. He didn't wait for a moderator. He walked directly toward the journalist. The scraping of his chair against the floor cut through the journalist's monologue. Heads turned. Security details tensed up. The entire room froze. Yet Yoon, blinded by his own arrogance, kept talking, unaware that the leader of a sovereign nation was closing the distance. Marcos reached the journalist and, without asking, without hesitating, physically ripped the microphone out of his hands. Let me repeat that a sitting president physically disarmed a journalist. The sound of the mic being yanked away thumped through the speakers. Yoon was left with his mouth open, hands still extended, grasping at empty air. He was silenced, literally and metaphorically. President Marcos held the microphone. He didn't scream. He didn't rant. He looked Yoon in the eye, and then he looked at the room, and he delivered a sentence that was perfect in its brevity and devastating in its impact. I will not allow anyone to attack her unfairly. 12 words. He didn't debate the tennis match. He didn't argue about line calls. He established a moral boundary. He was saying, "She is under my protection, and you are done." He then placed the microphone firmly on the table, a symbolic gesture that the conversation was over, turned his back on the journalist, and walked over to Eala. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a protective, fatherly gesture. He leaned down and whispered to her. We don't know exactly what he said, but we saw the result. Eala smiled. The fear left her eyes. She knew she was safe. Now, we need to take a step back and analyze why this moment is resonating so deeply, not just in the Philippines, but globally. First, let's look at the diplomatic angle. In the world of international relations, what Marcos did was risky. You do not humiliate members of the host nation's press corps. It goes against every rule of diplomatic protocol. Experts in foreign policy would tell you this could cause tension between the Philippines and Thailand. But Marcos calculated correctly that the human element outweighed the diplomatic one. In the court of public opinion, he won a landslide victory. We live in an era where leaders are often seen as distant, calculated, and overly polished. They hide behind press secretaries and carefully drafted statements. We rarely see raw, authentic protective instinct. When Marcos took that microphone, he ceased to be just a politician. He became a protector. He showed that he was willing to get his hands dirty, willing to break the rules, to stand up for one of his own. For the Filipino people, this was a massive moment of national pride. To see their leader stand on foreign soil and refuse to let a Filipino be disrespected, that is powerful imagery. It reinforces a narrative of the father of the nation. Secondly, let's look at the media ethics angle. This incident has sparked a massive debate about the role of sports journalism. Sway Kai-yin represents an old-school style of reporting where the journalist makes themselves a star, where cruelty is mistaken for toughness. By shutting him down so publicly, Marcos exposed the ugliness of that style. He turned the tables. Yoon, who wanted to be the hero of the Thai narrative, became the villain of the global story. He will forever be known as the man who bullied a 20-year-old girl and got shut down by a president. The legacy of the moment. As the dust settles, the video of this encounter has garnered millions of views. The hashtag #MarcosProtectsEala is trending. But beyond the viral fame, there are lasting implications here. For Eala, this reinforces her status not just as an athlete, but as a national treasure. She knows that her country and her government has her back. That kind of psychological security is invaluable for a young athlete moving forward in her career. She can walk into any stadium in the world knowing she is not alone. For President Marcos, this reframes his image. It adds a layer of strength and decisiveness to his public persona. It is a moment that humanizes him while simultaneously projecting authority. And for the Southeast Asian Games, it serves as a stark warning. The days of unchecked home court hostility and media bullying may be numbered. The world is watching. cameras are rolling. And as we just learned, you never know who might stand up and take the microphone away. Conclusion: this story is about more than just a gold medal. It is about the breaking point. It is about the moment when decency overrides protocol. Eala fought a war on the court to end a 26-year drought. She did her job, and when the system tried to tear her down for it, her president stepped in to do his job. I will not allow anyone to attack her unfairly. A simple sentence. A complex situation. A historic outcome. I want to know what you think. Was this a heroic act of protection or a breach of diplomatic protocol? Did the journalist deserve to be silenced, or should the president have handled it differently? This is a debate that is going to rage on, and I want to hear your voice in the comments below. This has been a deep dive into one of the most explosive moments in sports history. We will continue to monitor the fallout from the SEA games and bring you the stories that no one else is telling. Thank you for watching. Stay strong. Stand up for what is right, and I will see you in the next video.